Welcome everybody to the 20th edition already of the CIRCL College Tour. Normally we would have had this session in a hybrid fashion, so people physically being present here and people online. Unfortunately, as you know, we have a online version only, but thank you very much for taking the time and being with us. Today's topic is very interesting, especially for me as a sector banker, business services within ABN AMRO Bank, because it refers to the labor market. As you know, the main theme is of course the circular economy and all the elements that have to do with that very important subject. And for me as a sector banker, the labor market development are key in understanding my sector. And also, of course, one of the questions I have had on my mind for a long time is the circular economy impact on the labor market and on my sector. If you look at the circular economy developments, you can ask yourself whether the historical developments we have seen with regard to the emergence of sectors in general, whether that will change because of the theme of the circular economy. What I mean is, of course, long time ago we started with the primary sector, the agrarian type of activities. Then we came with the industrial sector, as we all know, the mid of the previous century. And then we kind of progressed towards a service economy that we are now in the midst of. And the question that's on my mind is whether this whole circular movement will be the next sector, when it becomes a very important part of the way we do business as an economy and the way people work. So I've been wondering for a long time how many jobs will actually be changed into kind of a circular economy type of job. And then of course you have to ask yourself what is the definition then of a circular economy type of job, and how can we measure that, and what type of competences do we need in this new circular economy based world. All these questions will I not be able to answer, and that's why I'm quite happy to have two speakers who know much more about this subject that I will introduce in a minute. First of all, I can tell you that each speaker has a small TED talk type of timing, 18 minutes per speaker, and I will be the facilitator for today, and of course also for the discussion that will take place after we have had our presentations. One of the things finally that pops into my mind when doing this introduction is of course the impact of Corona on this acceleration towards a circular economy. And there the signals are quite mixed, but I think if you look at the energy transition, so reducing the CO2 levels, the Corona crisis is kind of a blessing in disguise, as you all will understand. More importantly, and being closer to the topic for today, the labor market and the way we work, I have to say that the migration for me and many of my colleagues towards a more online type of doing your work, I think we've kind of adopted that now on a larger scale in 6 months than we previously thought was possible. So there are some encouraging things happening through Corona that also have to do with increasing the labor productivity and removing a lot of the slack that you normally have in work and meetings and all kinds of transactional related costs. Without much further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. That's Esther Goodwin-Brown. She will introduce herself, and afterwards we will have a discussion with the three of us, and of course we hope that you will also ask questions online, which we will address in our meeting afterwards. Esther, if you could take the floor, please.
Hi, it's really lovely to be here with you all today, and great that we can still have this really important conversation with everyone at home and a few of us here recording in the studio. My name's Esther Goodwin-Brown. I'm the Strategist and Partnerships Manager working on the Circular Jobs Initiative at CIRCL Economy. So for those of you that don't know us, we are an Amsterdam-based impact organisation, and we work with cities, with businesses and with nations on applying really practical tools to accelerate the transition to the circular economy. And the Circular Jobs Initiative is one of our most recent areas of work, but a really important and growing area where we're very much focusing on the social impacts of the circular economy. So what type of jobs will it create? What is the quality of those jobs? Who are those jobs created for? And what kind of skills do people need in these jobs? And the training pathways that are needed to upskill people currently in work and also train the future workforce. And so anyone that's interested in this area will know that there's a lot of statistics out there about the impacts that the circular economy will have on the labour market. And there generally is an agreement that there'll be a net positive impact on the labour market. So new jobs created, as well as some of the current jobs being transformed. Of course, we'll also see a decline in certain jobs, particularly in energy-intensive and carbon-intensive sectors. And so here you can see some research from the European Commission where we see that, of course, there's a decline in areas like mining, but we see a huge gain in jobs in waste management, in services, and the repair and installation sectors. And here you can also see on the left-hand side how the figures compare on the worldwide European, and then looking at particular countries, and then even Amsterdam on the city level. And so here this also shows how the shift and gains in employment and decreases in employment will be shared across different sectors, then also shed some light on how the skills demands will change. So again, we can see that there'll be gains in employment in services, in manufacturing, and in renewable energies, but we see a decrease in areas like mining, and a general trend towards more highly skilled jobs, but really still a demand for low, medium and high skilled jobs across the board, so a really diverse range of jobs. And so when it comes to making sure that people have the right skills for the workforce, this is obviously one of the biggest tasks that we have ahead. We know that there's a general upskilling required across the board and across sectors in terms of task diversification that comes with circular jobs, and also the general upskilling that comes with technological advances that we see supporting lots of different circular strategies. So here we can see as a global statistic from McKinsey indicating the skills gaps that companies are experiencing globally. But then, for example, in the Netherlands, 25% of companies say that skills gaps are currently hampering their progress. So we really need to get to the bottom of what the skills are that are needed and put in place the training pathways to make sure that companies and workers are confident in applying circular strategies. So we go from the general and the global to some quite specific skills in countries. So for example, in France, we know that roughly 80,000 people over a 3-year period required training in the construction sector to work with building information modelling. So this might seem like quite a specific skill, but it really shows the level of digitally enabled skills that we need in the workforce and the types of training pathways that we might need to implement. So what are circular jobs? And I thought it'd be helpful to define that before we go into the discussion. At Circle Economy, we say that a circular job is any occupation that directly or indirectly supports a circular strategy. So we use the 7 key elements framework to understand the circular economy. And in light blue, you see the core circular sectors. So in repair, in waste management, in renewable energy. And this is where we see the core circular jobs. And the dark blue, you see the enabling strategies of the circular economy. So in design, in digital technology, in collaboration, which are important for upscaling and accelerating the transition to the circular economy. So using this framework, we say that we have core and enabling jobs that overlap directly with the strategies that I mentioned on the previous slide. But we also take this one step further by identifying the indirectly circular jobs. So the jobs that indirectly support the activities of the circular economy. So we can think about marketing, strategy, the educators and the teachers that are going to make sure that everyone has the skills that we need. And so here's just some examples of some of the core and enabling jobs that we see coming through and being very important in the circular economy transition. And to make sense of all of this, these definitions, and to provide some really practical tools that local, national and international stakeholders can use to make sense of progress towards the circular economy through the lens of employment, we developed the Circular Jobs Monitor. And so this is an online tool and the first of its kind, which gathers and displays all of the data that we have on circular jobs using a methodology that we've developed to measure the number of circular jobs right down to municipality level. And it displays it for people to click around. And so I wanted to show here an example of, if you go onto the monitor yourself, and we'll share a link at the end of the presentation, how you can explore the monitor, clicking on the Netherlands, looking at the total percentage, going down to the core and enabling sectors, seeing what type of jobs and which sectors that relates to, and then even clicking down into the regional and the municipality level. And so here you can compare different regions, look at what the strengths are of different regions in terms of the circular economy, and really look at the benchmark that we're now working from. So what did we find in the Netherlands? We found that 8.6% of jobs currently contribute to the circular economy. So this is a starting off point in order to continue to measure progress. And interestingly, we see that there are more jobs in these enabling and indirect sectors, and slightly fewer in the core sectors, so ones in circular waste management, in repair, and in renewable energy. And so as well as creating this circular jobs index, what we also do at Circle Economy is try and look at how will implementing different circular strategies within different sectors impact on jobs. So how will current jobs change, what jobs will increase in demand, and which ones may decrease. So using an example from our Circularity Gap report for the Netherlands that we launched in March of this year, we looked at two strategies within the construction sector. So how increasing the quality of secondary materials used in buildings would impact employment, and the digitization of buildings and material management. And so here we can see from core to enabling to indirect a real transformation in jobs. So transformation in procurement, so what the skills that you'll need in procurement in order to bring in the kind of services and work with the type of partners that can supply these high quality secondary materials. A huge increase in the sourcing and supply of secondary materials. So with the circular economy being a localized approach, we'll see more and more SMEs and organizations that can collaborate in order to use resources from one building site and turn them into new materials for another. And when it comes to digitization, this is a skill set and a transformation that we see across a lot of skills. So as we mentioned before, building information modeling and the skills to work with this is going to be increasingly important across facility management, asset management, and urban planning. But we'll also see an increase in the number of dedicated teams designing new applications for different organizations of different scales to use to make sure that we can fully make the most of these tools and feed that into the circular strategies. And so I also wanted to share some research that we've done in Scotland, where this is an example where we looked at the impact of 3 strategies in the construction sector. And here, if you look at the closed loop cycling at the top, the off-site construction strategy, and the digitization of buildings and material management at the bottom, you get a sense of the spread of jobs that will be required, and also how they relate to one another. And so here we can see within our value chain, we're skipping the point of extraction. With these strategies, we're no longer taking new materials from the ground, and we're through the closed loop sourcing of secondary materials. We're feeding that into new buildings that can be constructed off-site through prefab construction. And then we see the importance of marketing managers that can market those products, and logistics managers who can make sure that this web of organizations works together towards the circular economy. And so there are some opportunities, but also some challenges. As I mentioned, there is a certain amount of uncertainty about the skills that are needed in the circular economy, and which is leading to some hesitance in the parts of employers, and a lack of clarity about what type of skills to invest in and how to upskill their teams appropriately. So this is why we need to have more conversations like this, and the work of the Sustainability University helping us to pin down some of those skills. What we also need to be careful of is, whilst we promote circularity and circular jobs within the countries that we're focusing on, so within the Netherlands, within Europe and others, we need to make sure that we also balance this with reducing the impact on jobs in global supply chains. So thinking about the textiles industry and the fact that many of those jobs are in production are currently focused in Southeast Asia. If we take that sector and we turn it circular within Northern Europe, what's the impact on jobs for people in other continents? And so one of the ways of approaching the skills gap is to invest along the lines of the EU skills strategy in regional and national upskilling programs. So looking at the skills that we have and the strengths of different regions and different nations, and developing matching programs and upskilling programs so that everyone across the board can receive the training they need. Because there's also a challenge in the fact that we often see workers, a bias towards workers that already have high skilled or in these highly skilled jobs receiving the most training. So we need to make sure that we make that training available to everyone. There's also a lot of lessons that can be learned from the social economy, social organisations that are already based in our communities and working with people from a distance from the labour market, and that might know best how to create some of these decent work conditions, include different people, and make sure that the circular economy transition is truly inclusive and is a just transition. And perhaps very relevant to some of the audience that will be joining today is the opportunity to drive demand for circular jobs through investment and procurement. So by procuring circular services, by investing and financing circular businesses, that's a direct link to creating jobs and is a really important step that we need to take. So I just wanted to share here some of our resources and we'll also share a link to the Circular Jobs Monitor in case you'd like to click around it and see some of our insights from different countries and the Netherlands on circular jobs and skills. And thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you CIRCL for inviting us. It's a pity that I cannot see your faces, but I'm sure you're all smiling. I'm happy that you joined us online. My name is Rosanna Alderliefste and I'm a consultant at the ROC Group. And in that role I, for example, teach a course on circular economy at the University of Amsterdam. And I also work for the Sustainability University. I'm also a singer, but we'll not get into that today. So first a little bit about the Sustainability University. We are a platform for sustainability professionals and we did research on competences that are needed for professionals in existing businesses to accelerate circular economy. And just like Esther said, it's very important to have more research on these competences and the skills. There's not yet a lot of research done, so we made a start. And this research is based on the book of Carola Wijtogen, who is one of the founders and the director of the Sustainability University. And the competences that you see here are the competences that are needed for a professional working on sustainability in general. But as we know, circular economy asks for a different way of working and therefore also for a different set of competencies and a different set of skills. So there was a little bit of background about us, but I'm really curious who I'm talking to. So I have this little question prepared. I'm very curious what your experience is with realizing circular projects. And I think the idea is that you can type into the chat box A, B or C. So A is none to a little, B is realized one project, and C is that you realized more than one circular project. Why I'm asking this is because we see that a lot of circular projects are indeed being activated, being managed, being realized. But according to our latest survey that we conducted under several sustainability professionals in companies, mostly Dutch companies, we saw that circular economy as a topic is lagging behind in comparison to other sustainability topics. For example, as you can see in the graph, climate and energy and social responsibility. And what this survey also showed us is that the sustainability professional cannot do it alone in a company. We need all different disciplines in a company to accelerate circular economy. And this means that we need all professionals working in those disciplines to become more CE competent. So not only the sustainability professional, but all professionals. And they need CE competencies, which are based on CE skills and CE knowledge. So as it is about persons, we also, besides our research and our survey, we took a practical approach and we visited some frontrunners in circular economy. For example, you see here the Dutch Railways and Meerlanden, which is a waste disposal company. And there we had a look, what are these frontrunners doing and these people working in these organizations, what are they doing differently than other professionals? What are their circular skills and competencies? So I had another question prepared, because of course in search of the ideal competency profile, which I would like to share with you, I was very curious what you thought that would be the top 4 competencies. But maybe you can just type it in so we can have a look at it afterwards during the Q&A and we can reflect on it later. I will just now share them with you. And these are the 4 competencies. So this set of competencies will make a professional more successful when managing circular economy in a company, or embedding it. And it's system thinking, management and entrepreneurship, foresight thinking, and interpersonal skills. And what I'd like to do with you now is go into those competencies and see how do you relate to circular skills. So the first one is foresight thinking. And foresight thinking, if you relate it to circular skills, actually means that you have the ability to take the inside of the outside in. So what you do, you have to be able to provide an overview of all the developments and all the plans that are happening internally, but also externally, and then relate them to the challenges on circular economy that your company is facing now. And this also has to do with seeing opportunities that might not be possible now, because, for example, for technological reasons, but might be possible in the future. And you have to provide this information and think about an opportunity that might be possible in the future when that technological solution is there. And it also asks for the ability to think in different scenarios, and not only thinking about these different scenarios, but also anticipate on them and critically assess them. So, for example, you have a specific scenario that you want to use for your circular project or your circular plan. You have to think, okay, what will be the impact on the long term for my company, but also for the society. So, you really have to think long term. A thing that I liked from the CE matching sessions was a sustainability professional who took quite a practical approach there, who said, yeah, I looked very, very far in front of me, how do you say it, like in the future. And I was just looking what kind of agreements are there, what kind of partners do we have, and when can we change them so it will fit our challenges that we encounter now and in the future better. So it's really the skill of looking into the future and bringing it, relating it to your company. And then the next competency is management and entrepreneurship. And with management and entrepreneurship, it asks first of all that you have a vision on the circular economy, on circular economy project program. It's maybe even broader. You have to have this visionary skill to see what you want to reach and what are your goals for the circular economy within your company. And once you have this vision ready, you should be able to translate this vision into a plan. You have to have a specific program or plan with all the steps that you want to make to reach your vision. But then you also should be able to manage it. So here it really asks for entrepreneurial skills. It asks you to see opportunities for your company, but also to act on them and make sure that they get implemented and manage them. So besides entrepreneurial skills, it also asks for change management and for project skills. Because you have to be moving around in this constantly changing environment while reaching your goals and holding on to those goals. And also with relation to project management skills, you have to be able to prioritize all these different opportunities and select the ones that will fit your challenges and your company best. So let's see what a nice example is from CE matching. I think, for example, one professional said, you should find a partner in crime and never give up. I really like that one in relation to the entrepreneurial skills, because if I see an entrepreneur, I see someone who, you know, just has a plan, has a vision and goes for it. And that's what you really saw with these CE professionals. They just bit into something and they went for it. So that's a really nice example from the CE matching sessions. Then the next one, it's interpersonal skills. And this is really about being able to realize and also recognize all these different interpersonal processes when you're implementing circular economy within your company. It's about social skills, communicative skills. It's about networking skills. It's about, for example, being able to bring together all the different stakeholders within your company, but also outside your company, and ask them, what does this plan, this circular plan or the circular program means for you? How does it, what does it change for you? How can you help? What do you need from me? Do you worry about something? It's just all the different elements that you need to know from your stakeholders. And also, by asking them, what can you do? It's also about supporting and coaching people. So sportive and coaching skills, I would say. It's about putting front runners within your company into the spotlight and reward them for their actions. But it's also about being flexible and being able to level with all the different people within your organization, outside your organization, to be able to have very different partnerships, but also, for example, not only get your co-workers along, but also the top management. Because it can be very frustrating once you have all these ambassadors in your company and then the top says, no, we're not going to do it. So that's about interpersonal skills. And then my favorite one, system thinking. And I think it's my favorite one because it's quite of an abstract competence, but a very important one. Actually, according to our research, it was mentioned as the most important competency for circular skills. It's actually defined as understanding the subsystems and the systems within your value chain, your company and society, but understand how they all interact with each other and that they are depending on each other. So it's interesting that it's the most important one for circular economy, or actually seen as the most important one, because it's quite of a new competence. And what I mean by that is that it's not, at this moment, part of the standardized HR handbooks. It's also not used in assessments, it's not used in your recruitment. And this is quite interesting as it's seen as the most important one. And it's also interesting that we asked our CE professionals, okay, how do you define system thinking then? And we got so many different responses on that and so many different interpretations. So I wanted to take a little bit more time for this specific competence and what it means for in relation to circular skills. So I made some extra slides. So in relation to circular economy skills, it means that you're able to see the whole picture. So actually, it's about zooming in and out, like the lens that I'm looking at now. You want to zoom into all the details and the several parts of the system, but you also want to zoom out to see the bigger picture and to understand how all these different elements and subsystems relate to each other and interact with each other. This means that if you're working on a circular economy project, that you will understand that you have to look for the root cause of the problem. And then when you found which elements you need to focus on, that you say, okay, I focus on these and these and these elements, and I will monitor them. And with these elements, there will be a ripple effect on the other elements, and then I can reach my goal. So just to make it a little bit less abstract, I would like to take the example of a disposable coffee cup. Let's say you want to reduce the waste in your company. Then you can say, okay, I'm gonna replace all the disposable cups with compostable cups. That's a great idea, it's a great start. But then you have to realize that you also have to change the waste bins. You have to change the, how do you say it, the things that they end in the the containers. You have to change the logistics. It might be handy to also contact the facility manager to tell him or her what's going on and that the processes are changing. Also, when you've done that, there also should be an industry available that can process these compostable cups into something, into valuable compostable resources. So there also should be a market for it. And this is just one example to say that you might think it's an easy start to change this, but there are so many different elements in the systems that you have to take into account, so how they interact and relate to each other. And also, I want to emphasize that if you understand the system, it doesn't mean that you have to act on all these different elements in the system. It means that you understand it and that you can select some elements and then create a ripple effect to reach your goal. So maybe not start with coffee, but what you can start with is by participating in one of our upcoming events. We have a specific training on system thinking and competencies. Now I just gave you a quick overview of the competencies and how they relate to your skills, but during the training we will actually get to know you a little bit better, which competencies you already have and how you can improve them. And we will also publish a white paper in November. The date will be announced. You can start by reading the book, of course. And for all other questions, you can ask them during the Q&A, or you can find our contact form on our website. So thank you for your attention, and talk to you in a bit.
Let me kick off the discussion by trying to summarize very briefly what I've heard. If I listen to your presentation, Esther, then I saw this outside-in type of analysis of labor markets, and you zoomed in into the construction sector. What I liked very much in terms of low-hanging fruits is, let's say, the crucial role of the purchase department, where you can actually enforce, let's say, the transition towards more circular buying and circular economy transition activities. And your presentation was much more on the employees and the management and the competencies you need there. So my question would be, if I listen to both your stories, where does education comes in? Because the competencies that you were talking about, they're quite difficult to achieve, and not all the employees and not even management has all these competencies. So where do we start?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and good and valid question. And actually what we see now is that, like I said, for example, system thinking is quite a new competence, but also the other competences are not yet being trained in education or by training institutions. So when does it start? It's actually very interesting. There's actually a very interesting article by Jan Jutte. He's an educational consultant. And he said, actually, we should start as soon as possible, as if I may rephrase it like that. And because it's such an important, these are such important skills that you need to train on an early age. So yeah, I think it's a very important part. It would be great if it would be an important part of education. And I said that I've been also teaching at the university on the circular economy. We work together with students, and it's really nice that one of the students had a question from a high school, and they actually wanted to get more sustainability and especially circular economy within their curriculum. And here, like I quickly touched upon, competencies exist out of skills and knowledge, of course, if I say it very easily. And there they really wanted to focus on the knowledge parts. But I think it would be great if there also will be more attention for skills already there. Yeah, it would be great.
Okay, listening to your reply and thinking of Esther's presentation, I wonder if you look at the Dutch economy and the UK economy, it would be a bit strange animals, because the service economy for such a long time has been so dominant in our GDP contribution. I think we can learn a lot from the Brits, because there's a lot of thinking power, of course, at top universities and other places, consultants also like you. So what type of stuff can we learn in this circular transition from the UK? You think you're further ahead in terms of the penetration into sectors?
I think it's hard to compare countries like for like because the economies are so different. And I mean, the Netherlands is seen as a front runner in so many cases, and really organisations that are leading and trying to create that vision. And there are certainly organisations that are doing that in the UK. We did some work in Cornwall, which is quite a unique coastal rural community very far in the south of the country, which is really trying to lead the way in terms of circular thinking, working with SMEs, but then also the Exeter University has part of its campuses based there. And so it was really interesting to see how, when we looked at the number of circular jobs, the type of people that came around the table and that were interested in what they could do with that data and how they could link that up to local strategies and supporting local businesses. So I think we can't compare countries like for like, and there's lots of interesting practice happening here, but also in lots of countries.
Okay. Okay, maybe not a comparison between countries, fair point, but maybe a comparison between generations. You're both from the millennial generation, I got the impression.
Yeah.
And I got the impression a lot of the competences you talked about are more embedded into the millennial generation already as we speak. But I see within my organizations 4 generations in the workforce with different competencies and different, let's say, feel for the circular economy. And we notice now that by promoting that we are a circular bank, we are promoting the circular transition, that we get access to young people. So in terms of a purpose side effect for recruitment, I think the circular economy is a very important weapon to find talent in a scarce labor market. What are your thoughts on that way of looking at circular transition?
I think it's definitely encouraging and interesting to see how many young people are drawn to the circular economy. But I think it's also interesting to think about how you can create it as a career destination for people in mid to later career transitions. Because we see that lots of jobs that contribute to the circular economy are actually quite a unique makeup of skills. So thinking about the bioeconomy and the people that need to be running these biorefineries to turn the byproducts into fuel or high quality proteins, it requires quite a specific set of knowledge that we could of course start to build more in undergraduate and PhD programs, but also by working with workers that already have a lot of existing experience, we can bring those in, I think.
Yes, I understand. And from your perspective, if you look at your colleagues in your age group, they look at circular transition the same way as you do?
Not necessarily. I think it varies. But if I don't look at my generation, but the generation even younger, but they like my students. They're already so into this sustainability topic. They know already so much. I see this, last year I was teaching, I saw it, and now it's even more. And they're getting this way of thinking, what you need for circular economy, but also the knowledge and the concepts and the skills. They get it so easily, and easier than for my feeling when I was a student, for example. So, and I really see them getting enthusiastic about it as well. I see how quickly they integrate it in their way of thinking. So I see a lot of motivation there, and I'm happy. I really see them as my little front runners. I really hope to educate them to get into that labor market and bring all those skills and knowledge
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe a controversial issue, but we are among friends here, nobody is looking. So that COVID could be seen as a blessing in disguise in getting into this circular transition. It kind of reinforces or accelerates some of the goals you would like to achieve. What's your view on that? Is that a bit of a cynical way of looking at it, or?
I think we have to take everything, the positives that we can at the moment in every situation. I mean, we have been really encouraged to see the profile of this issue just skyrocket in the last 6 months, and obviously that's coming in the backdrop of millions of people losing their jobs as well. So it's really how can we create an opportunity out of an awful situation. But the fact that it has heightened people's attention for the fact that we can't go back to those old models, those global supply chains that employ the majority of people are incredibly vulnerable. We've seen most people in those lose their jobs. And how can we balance that with a more localized approach? And then also these jobs that that won't go out of fashion. Working in renewables is going to be needed for as long as we're around, and they're also these very energy-intensive jobs. So I think, obviously, we have to take it in carefully in the context of lots of people that are currently out of work, but trying to create as many opportunities for as many different types of people with the opportunity that we've got now to really rethink the labour market, but also the economy more generally.
Yes, yes. Well, I was in a call a couple of months ago with the HR director of Siemens, and he said exactly that they were so taken aback by the COVID disaster in terms of the global supply chains, that their plans were to get back to insourcing again and doing production locally again. And so our analysts think that COVID might be a positive thing for our own industrial capabilities, because we do production again here in the Netherlands. And of course the criticism on the UK economy is that there's only consultants consulting other consultants because it's such a big service economy. So I think the COVID might increase a circular responsible industrial production and thinking anew about processes. But also what I found very interesting in your story was the ability to look ahead. And that's one of the main responsibilities in my department, in my job. But the problem is, I did a London School of Economics training about future planning, and the professor said, it's so insecure what is happening in the future, what's going to happen in the future. The only thing we have is history. And I was very happy with that, because I'm a historian in training, and it was the first thing I heard somebody say something nice about history. But your point is very well taken. In this uncertainty, you have to look into the future, but how about scenarios? And how positive are you about, are we in time with this circular transition? Are we too late? Isn't it the tipping point already past us in terms of saving the planet?
I hope to believe not. No, yeah, I think you're saying some interesting things here, because one of the things that I would like to answer to is that you said, yeah, it's so difficult to with all these insecurities and all these different scenarios to say, okay, this is going to happen. And what I liked was one of the sustainability professionals during the CE matching said, if you cannot show the what's going to happen with circular economy, or what the effect will be of your circular economy program, then show the alternative based on history, could be. But that might be easier, because sometimes it's really difficult what your circular project will actually do.
Yes.
But then you can show what's going to happen when you don't do it. Are we too late? What do you think?
I also hope not. And I think there are plenty of examples of countries making huge gains in a small amount of time. And if you're thinking about the uncertainty about what jobs look like and what the skills are, it's really looking at the research that you've been doing and some of the sort of transferable skills that will be applicable whatever direction the sectors go in.
Yeah.
So how do we build this resilience into the labour market? It isn't just about supply chains, but also about people, and creates more mobility and more connections between sectors. That means that people can more easily move, and it's not seen as such a threat or a gloom and doom that we're moving towards.
Okay, that's a very encouraging answer. Of course, there's a very English expression that says, old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And my question to you would be, if you look at large corporations in the UK, in the Netherlands, are they the old soldiers that will just fade away because there's a new world emerging that you are the representatives of, with new competencies, new skills, new products, services? Is there something happening already we don't see from a large corporation point of view?
I mean, obviously some large corporations that do their business in quite extractive industries or carbon intensive industries will need to adapt and change, and not all companies will go on that transition. But you could see very large corporations like Philips here is a front runner in the circular economy. They have a lighting as a service model. They have their refurbished MRI scanners. And they've spoken several times to members of their team about, what skills do you have in your workforce? What type of workers do you look for? And really, they've just completely taken on that transition as everyone receives this training. We don't see it as an additional investment and a choice to make. We're really rolling with the times and making the best of it and bringing our workers along with that. So yes. I think you can see good and bad examples of all sizes of companies.
Yeah,
yes.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think that's a good example of Philips, also internationally in the Harvard Business Review startup studies. The thing why I'm asking is, I'm a big fan of Ronald Coase, and he's a rather unknown economist who wrote a PhD in 1936, and he got a Nobel Prize. His thesis was called The Nature of the Firm, and he asked himself, previous century, why do we organize work by using hierarchies, let's say large organization, management processes, layers? Why don't we do it through the market? Let's say independent contractors who, let's say, help each other and create something. I get the impression that one of the things we see emerging now in your world is exactly that. So teams operating in a very agile way, doing their thing by using technology as a means of coordination and not hierarchy. And it's not culture-based, it's not your Dutch thing, but if you go to the London East Side, you see similar type of startups taking place. Is that something you recognize, or is there still a lot of, let's say, appetite for working in large organizations among your generation?
I mean, I think I can't speak for everyone, but I think that there are more and more of these startups, and it obviously draws a younger workforce because of this ability to work on new and emerging areas. But then there's also those huge growth potential and sort of personal development that you see in larger organizations as well. So I think it's really about trying to make sure that the benefits that you might receive in a large organization or a small organization are mirrored on both sides. And so if that's about additional support for the SMEs that are doing these innovative, more horizontal models, to make sure that people in those organizations can still receive professional and personal development like in a large corporation, I think that would be fantastic to see.
The best of both worlds.
Because it's all about continual lifelong learning, and particularly with the circular economy transition, because we're in a transition, it means we're in a constant state of change, and we need to reach this end. So it's really about embedding all of those opportunities to learn and adapt,
yes.
I think.
Yes. Because listening to your story, the competencies you emphasize, like networking, they're all type of skills you need in this horizontal network type of setting of work, and not so much the traditional hierarchical world. I don't know how you view these developments taking place in your world.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. Do you think that networking is more important when you're working hierarchy, when you're working horizontally than vertically? It's maybe a different way of
it's a different way of
networking,
It's
right?
not networking, let's say, I want a next job with more pay and make a career. That's a classical type of network.
Yeah.
You need a lot of networking for that, I think.
Also, yeah,
maneuver your way.
Yeah, but also I think it has to do, maybe it connects a little bit with the interpersonal skills competency that we talked about, where I mentioned the networking skill. And networking is not only like looking around externally with your partnerships, but it's also getting along, being flexible and being able to level with all the other people in your organization. So also in a vertical.
Okay. In the more old-fashioned setting.
I would say that networking is important to get your case or your plans implemented. So I don't know. I don't think it necessarily asks for more networking.
No, but for your friends, let's say your personal experience, the people around you, talented young people, often females, unfortunately, in these days, and boys they tend to lag behind. But what do you see in terms of preferences or how they adapt?
Well, in terms of preference, working for a big company or a startup, I see, like you said, you want to have, there are both advantages of working in a big company and in a startup. So what I see is not necessarily that they choose for several time. So they switch after 2 years to another job, and then they don't necessarily switch to get up into their career, but they switch to get more experience in different areas, different types of working. Like you said, working for a startup is most of the time completely different. You get a different set of skills than working in a big company. So that's what you see. They just switch more and are less focused on making a quick career, like higher pay or higher status, but quick career in getting a lot of knowledge, different skills.
Okay, and then some encouragement for the 50+ executives that have tuned in and kind of lost the understanding of the world, like my dad many years ago. You mentioned something very interesting. Beyond the generation millennials, you said the generation after that. And I don't know how you call them. Is it generation Einstein or even generation Alpha? Even they start from Alpha, from scratch.
Some sort.
So they're even more I'd say obsessed with the whole circular economy.
Not necessarily only with circular economy, because for some people it's quite a new and an abstract concept. But sustainability is something that I see. These students are age 19. Mm-hmm. They all know what sustainability entails. Like what they're all, not only the concept, but also what can we as a person do in my daily businesses. And you see, if I ask them like the first lesson, I ask them. What did you do with your lost phone? What happened with them? That you get them this way of thinking about circular economy. And a lot of them actually say they now have old phones, and we started talking about clothes, and they all are so these are small things, of course, but they are so motivated and how do you say it? Focused
internalized, probably.
Yeah,
also.
they're internalized. Like, this is something we need to do, and I think this, of course, has to do. But also, if you see all the protests, like, it's our planet. We have to live here for another, what is it, 80 years, for them, or more or less. But so yeah, it's. Sorry, did I answer your question this way?
It's a bit of a philosophy.
And we're getting a little philosophy.
My question was quite long, but it was a good answer. The reason I ask is that in The Guardian, there's a very interesting set of articles on the state of the planet. And let's say that for me that was a cause of sense of urgency. I knew it was important, but the problem is in this day and age you get so much conflicting information about the sense of urgency. And all these Guardian articles, they kind of reinforce the idea in my head that it's really, you shouldn't wait too long with all the stuff that you have been discussing. Yeah. And it also makes me think of Steve Hawkins, the famous physicist who was in a program, and somebody asked him, why did aliens never contacted us? And then he said, you know, it's very simple. These guys are looking at the Earth and they're saying, these guys, they only have 100 years max. It's not even, why bother? Duh. Eh? So okay. I can use that message to increase the sense of urgency, because I still think among many companies, especially these shareholder-driven companies, the sense of urgency is still too low. So
how can we get the older generation to get more inspired to develop these new skills? We touch upon the younger generation quite a few, but how can we inspire the older generation? Do you have any ideas on that?
That's a good question, I think.
Yeah, start. Yeah, please.
I'll start. Yeah. If you could jump in. I think it's sometimes about making some of the work that we do less abstract and seem less theoretical. When I say that I work in circularity or the circular economy, very few people, including of my age, know what I'm talking about. And so when you then compare it to the linear economy and the fact that, you know, traditionally we've been mining resources, turning them into products and disposing of them really quickly, and that actually we're just trying to close that loop, people really understand it. And the circular economy, you know, working in this way is new, but lots of the processes we're trying to build on are natural, traditional ways of doing things that people in lots of parts of the world still do. So it's really about creating a common understanding of what's needed and what the urgency is and what individuals can do and also businesses, because I think some of the confusion or the lack of action often comes because people think, well, what can I do? What can I do as someone that's older in my community compared to these young people? It's their role, or actually the businesses need to take a step, or it's government. So I think it's just about creating more of a shared understanding and some more of those tangible ways that people can have an impact themselves.
Yes, yes. And are you also positive on, let's say, the way older people, my generation, Generation X, and maybe even baby boomers can change, or?
Most definitely. It's about, I think you already touched upon some important things. You said it yourself, showing them the urgency, and also maybe they think, okay, I have less, my life is less longer than my grandchildren. Maybe they have grandchildren, so that's also a thing that I noticed in my environment, that once there's a little one, there switches something. But I most definitely think that with a more practical approach, making it less theoretical, it will help them to also understand it better. And it can be done, I don't know whether it sounds a little bit weird, but for example, someone in my family still uses these coffee cups for for the Nespresso
the
machines. Sorry, I
capsules,
don't know
yeah.
what I can call that kind of names.
The pads or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And this person didn't want to stop it, and then we got into this conversation about sustainability because it's a little small thing, of course. But I just bought this biodegradable cups. Capsules. Yeah, and he's so happy with it now, and this little capsule stimulated him to dive more into this topic, and now every time we meet each other we talk about this, and he asks about my work much more, and he says better what I do. So it's a very stupid small example maybe, but
no, maybe that's where it starts.
That's
small.
In terms of job growth, we just had the poll. We also showed it to our viewers at home, but who do you think is responsible for the job growth in the circular labor market? Is that, for example, the employer? Should they create more circular jobs? Or is it the entrepreneur? Should they develop more circular business models? Or maybe the government? Should they, for example, lower the tax burden on labor? Which of these three do you think is responsible for job growth in the circular labor market? Any ideas? Maybe
well, I can start quickly, and then anybody can kick in. We published a paper not too long ago called X-Tax, where we kind of launched an approach to reduce the tax on labor in order to make it easier for employers to invest in human capital and work as opposed to machines and automation. The question is whether you can really extend or let's say, prevent entrepreneurs from investing in machines. I think it's a difficult one by using tax, but I think it's certainly worthwhile to try. But I think the government also plays a very important role. So also in the scenarios we have been doing this summer on the future world, is it going to be a highly individual world or a more collectivistic world, or is it market dominated or government dominated? You see, in all honesty, that of course the role of the government in many areas, especially in my area, financial area, is increasing. And I think that the government should do more in enforcing a circular economy. But that's my personal opinion. I don't know how you look at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, every player has a role to play, but the governments really do need to sort of set the conditions for other players to take a step up. And we've already talked about the opportunity that we have with the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis, is how can governments work together, but also within their countries, to set investment packages into the right sorts of organisations and make sure that the new jobs that are created are relating to the circular economy. About the point that was made around taxes is a very vital one, because some of the research we've done speaking to different sectors in Norway, where the tax on labour is incredibly high compared to raw materials, it's incredibly hard to create a business case for even national providers or national service providers to move into, for example, repair models or increasing their recycling rate, because of the fact that if it creates jobs, it's not necessarily a positive message, depending on what the conditions are.
It's a good example. Yeah. And now that we have a couple of minutes left, is there something we can share with the audience in terms of best practices? So suppose you're an entrepreneur, you have a company, you have 5 or 10 people employed, maybe 100. What are the things they can do to accelerate this CE transition? Getting the right people aboard, I would say.
Yeah, but also give them an opportunity to train these skills. So you already said development. And so if they don't have the skills yet, make sure that they are able to get familiarized with that. I think that's a very important theme. I think it helps if all these people, I think it's more important that they have a big motivation and a vision with regards to circular economy than being absolutely trained in that yet. Because I also think you can learn that. Do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's different ways that people can acquire skills, and one of those is through company values and leadership. And learning on the job is a huge part of the skills that are in the circular economy. But it's about making sure the right training is available for the employees, but then also really consciously thinking as they grow their workforce or they start to utilise and move into the service economy and using parts of the platform economy and these digital platforms, how you can make sure that the working conditions for everyone that you directly employ, but then those others in other sectors or other organisations that you might be working with, that's really safeguarded.
Okay.
So thinking about the quality of the jobs, not just the number of them as well. That
No,
create.
I understand. And on a personal note, what type of characteristics would you like look at a company that you're applying for a job? Would you look at the CE component, of course, but how would you check that? How deep would you go? What type of things would you look at before you
Wow,
apply?
that's a very, very interesting question.
Yeah.
So how will you actually basically what you're asking, how do you know whether this person is able to do this or has these skills? Or
I'm trying to understand your mindset. You really look for the circle economy component in that company, and otherwise, if it doesn't have one, I'm not going to work there. So is it that black or white?
Oh, you mean the other way around? If I'm applying for okay, yeah, what would I do? Well, normally I would, if I would apply for a company, I would say that I will dive into their mission, into their yearly reports.
Annual reports, yeah.
Annual reports, yeah, exactly. Do they have a sustainability plan in place? Do they say something about purpose?
Okay.
So yeah, I would definitely do my research and saying like, what do they have? I would definitely also look like what do we have in terms of sustainability plans and ambitions. I would definitely also look at their training possibilities.
Interesting.
And whether I would specifically look for circular economy competencies, I don't know, but at least, yeah.
The other stuff you mentioned.
Because I don't think it will be there yet.
Well, some companies, DSM, there's many large listed companies now that have a clear purpose and CE-related policy.
Yeah, but also the competencies and the training programs that are focused on.
Yeah, but DSM maybe, the Dutch chemical companies, maybe not the right example because they started this, let's say more than 10 years ago. They were ahead of the troops, so to speak, and they also succeeded in building a business model with sustainability impact in there and be profitable. Because that's of course one thing, being a sustainable company and then make some money with it. So that they've been through that phase, and that's why they were very interesting to look at.
I will look into that.
And for you, what type of company would you look? How would the process look like if you apply for a company? Similar?
Well, I work for a company called CIRCL Economy. So for me, the job was easy. I knew that they were doing what I wanted to be doing. But I think, as you say, you can dive into people's websites and see what they're saying. But we all know that it's not always that easy to discern from what people are putting out, really what their mission and ethos is. So if you're then lucky enough to get to the stage where you're being interviewed, I think that's a great opportunity to ask who's interviewing you, what's the mission and vision, where did that come from, where do you really see that then the company is going, maybe if they're not necessarily a circular organisation yet, is that something that they're interested in moving into, and could you be part of that change? So I think it's interesting to try and have those conversations with people.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it all helps to explain your mindset of the younger generation. I'm learning, as you can see.
Maybe last question. Are these new skills a prerequisite for our economy to become more circular? Or would you say that circular jobs and skills would arise naturally as our economy becomes more circular?
Chicken
Do
or
you
egg?
have any thoughts on that, maybe Esther?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question because we know that the transition to the circular economy is going to be dependent on the skills that we have in the labour market and also shape it. So it's kind of a catch-22. We know that that we need to use the skills that we've got at the moment and that things will evolve as businesses and demands come onto the table. But we also can accelerate that transition if we really consciously build those skills in a different way. So I think we're seeing the change from both sides, and we need to try and push forwards on both respects.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, great.
You okay too?
Yeah, zoom in, zoom out, system thinking. See that it all
Exactly.
interrelates with each other. Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
I think it's time to wrap it up and to tell you a little bit about the next episode of the circular story. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and knowledge with us and with me.
Thank you.
Having this interesting conversation that is kind of unexpected in terms of topics. And so let me conclude by thanking you again and all the people online and their questions. Of course, the The episode can be viewed as a recording as well, so we hope you massively notify all your friends to have a look at this episode. And the next one will be on November 25th. And there's a book I would like to point you to, that's called the 7 Roles to Create Sustainable Success. And it's being zoomed in here. I'm not the author, nobody here is the author, but it's a very important book for getting more familiar with this topic. So again, thank you very much for your time, and see you next time on November 25th. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening.